Rand Paul, who has been the most aggressive about this because he understands how much shenanigans there were and how much things were rejiggered too late and done, how rules were changed without the legislature operating. Rand Paul understands that this is a matter for the states. It's not going to be solved by Texas suing Georgia. That's not going to work. It's a matter for the states, but the states could get a little goose from the federal government, and it is a state-by-state election, but it's a state-by-state election for federal office, and it's not a bad thing for the federal government to shine a spotlight on what they're doing. This is Rand Paul.
I think there's a lot of work to be done. While we will not dictate it to the states, I think we should have hearings going into the next year, hearing from state legislatures and what they're going to do to make sure election law is upheld, not changed by people who are not legislators. And we do have an interest in that. I don't want it to be federalized. Many on the other side of the aisle would just soon federalize it and mail everybody a ballot, and we'll have this universal corruption throughout the land. But what I think we need to do is keep it at the state level. But we can't just say it didn't happen. We can't just say, 4,000 people voted in Nevada that were non-citizens, and we're just going to ignore it. We're going to sweep it under the rug and say, the courts have decided the facts. The courts have not decided the facts. The courts never looked at the facts. The courts don't like elections, and so they stayed out of it by finding an excuse, standing or otherwise, to stay out of it. But the fraud happened. The election in many ways was stolen, and the only way it'll be fixed is by, in the future, reinforcing the laws.
You know, I think except for the fact that when he says the election in many ways was stolen, I think it's possible that he is talking about the fact that the press rigged the election. And there's no question about this. You know, this is where we get the information from. There's absolutely no question that the press had the press always has a pro-Democrat effect on elections. It always does. But this was untoward because it was just a pack of lies, not reporting Hunter Biden, reporting that it was a Russian disinformation campaign. That was a pack of lies. And of course, everything, I wouldn't blame people, even on the right, from feeling, well, Donald Trump is gone, but at least we won't have to be living at this constant state of crisis all the time. But that's what the press does. And I told you about that when Trump was elected. I told you about that 4 years ago when Trump was elected. I said, what the press will do is they will create a constant sense of crisis. Everything Donald Trump does will be a crisis. And eventually, because there's always a crisis in every presidency, eventually when the crisis hits, then it'll be like, oh my God, they're right. It's one crisis after another. They did this with George W. Bush and the hurricane down in New Orleans. Running up until that, they were hitting him again and again. Everything he did was a lie. Everything he said was a lie. Everything he did was a disaster. Everything he did was a crisis of authoritarianism, and our Constitution was in danger. And then when a hurricane hit and George W. Bush made the mistake of not going down there for a photo op, that was his mistake. They ripped him to pieces, and there was just this feeling like, this presidency is a disaster. They did it to Trump too.